the state of grace is, in my eyes, your ideal state of being. So the whole podcast is people that had challenges and then how did they reach their state of grace? Okay. And we want to know also what is your state of grace? To you is what propelled you to write this book?
Well, one thing my wife said, you have so many stories you compiled over 45 years or whatever it's been, and if you can somehow lace it with Harvey, Chris, it makes him more relatable. If it was just a name dropping book, everybody does name dropping books. But
Yes.
Trick, my wife said, make it about your relationship with him, not about just show business, but for your relationship with him because of like your love for baseball. And if you weave it in such a way that people sense that he was more than just a celebrity or more than a public figure, it makes him more relatable to people who don't know who he was beyond show business. And that it makes people realize he had a bigger picture in my life than just being that he was a performance. Like, what did he need to be as an advocate for my learning disability? And how did that affect my life? And because my life has always been kind of two track, which is show business, nonprofit fundraising. So it goes back and forth. And sometimes those worlds can collide in a good
Mm-hmm.
way. Sometimes they can be in a bad way. Because it's very easy for people to define me by who my father is and not let me be who I am because they measure me on, oh, you're affluent, you have money, you have status. I said, well, yeah, because my father has that. That doesn't mean I have it.
Right.
I have it by osmosis by who he is. I still have my own personal challenges I have to overcome or
Absolutely.
compensate with that has nothing to do with him.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
So,
guess there's two reasons why you wrote this book. It's first to show who you are, that you are your father's son, but you're also you.
right.
And also, people have assumptions also about celebrities and how they are. And so I think in this book, you're just showing him like a as a regular dad that just happened to have celebrity friends. Um,
Right.
I love the book, by the way.
Thank you.
It was very entertaining, very good, and also um, it was very touching. It was really it's a beautiful book.
Thank
And
you.
you had a challenge that you had to overcome. Um, what was the challenge? Can you tell us what the challenge was, and also what was your father's role within that challenge?
Or for your guests or people who tune in who are educators who might be listening, my learning disability in the clinical diagnosis is a delay in the learning process. It's the ability to retain information.
Hmm.
So if someone were to give me a piece of paper to read, like a brochure like this, I would have to take a little bit more time to read it. It would take me 15.5 seconds to read that. It would take you 1.5 seconds to read that. Because what I'm doing is I'm
Oh,
putting information in, but am I retrieving it? Am I gonna retain the information and then be able to spit it back out to you? It's like
mm,
the difference when people say, "Are you listening?" and you listen. Are you listening and you hearing? Listening and hearing are two different things. I can hear what you're
right.
saying. It doesn't mean I'm listening and I'm understanding what you're saying. I can hear what you're saying. So reading and comprehension is my challenge. So one of the things that my father did was he said, take a skill that you love. In my case, it was acting, theater. If you know that you have retention information, and how do you challenge that part of your brain, the left brain, right brain? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, well, you have to retain a certain amount of dialogue. By the time the director gives you the script on Monday, you have to memorize, let's say, 70 pages by Friday. Just take a little bits and chunk of each day. So take 10 pages, another 10, another 10, another 10. What you do is you practice, it's called muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
You're training your brain to because sometimes there's a play you're doing, they make a cut in a line cut or staging. you have to memorize all those things. And that's one of the things my dad had to learn from the Burnett show, because they got a script on Monday. By the time Friday came, they had like 10 more revisions. So he had to learn how to purge new information, bring in new, purge, bring in. And that was a skill that he taught me. So I figured, well, if I love acting and I love theater, because it also taught me within my learning disability, is that the learn of compromise, the learn of teamwork, working with other people who were in the theater, and that I couldn't engage these people just based on who my father was. It was I had to do the job. They weren't going to care who my father was. If I couldn't do the job, you don't get the role. So if I auditioned for all the roles in school, I had to prove it. I was not going to get who my father was.
Right, exactly.
So there is a pro and con with being someone who, the son of someone famous. The other thing, you have everything handed to you. And I think the fact that my learning disability is what it was kind of a safeguard from having an ego, is because I had to work harder at things that others didn't, who didn't have my name, but things came easier for them educational wise. I got
Right.
based on status, not based on effort. And I don't think that's fair to somebody else who tried hard and did a great job. They should get that. They should get the leading role, not because of who my father is. Or
Right. But there's a lot of nepotism in Hollywood, right?
yes,
Is
there is.
there is,
Um,
right?
for good or bad. It's I mean it's um, by the end of the day, it's like whether it's a Sheen or it's a Sutherland. As good as those people were, is that they had to deliver the job. Their parents, no matter how good their parents were, the kid has to deliver. So
Yes.
uh, people often say to me, "It's amazing you stay so grounded." And I jokingly tell people, it's hard to have an ego when your father spends the majority of your life dressed up in women's clothing.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like Grace, it's like your father's a lawyer, your father's a doctor. What does your father do? Well, let's see. This week he's dressed up like a chicken and an Avon lady. Well, I'm sorry, it's hard to walk around with an ego, an air of, oh, I'm this great guy. I'm like, no, your dad dressed like a farm animal this week. I'm like, okay, well, hey, it pays the bills.
Yes.
So I think uh, as the advocate that he was for me, and that's another very interesting thing that he taught me when he would go to school for a teacher parent conference meeting. I was astounded to hear, because I was in the other room or I was on the playground, that when he came in, it wasn't Harvey Korman, Mr. Haha guy. They got an informed, engaged advocate. That my father knew more about the American Disabilities Act than any teacher on the other side of that table, because he had to
Wow.
be like this advocate. But he set the tone for me, because he said, Chris, someday, if I can't do it for you, you have to be as articulate about your strengths and weaknesses as the other people who are in the field of education. And if they want to be taken seriously, they have to be able to engage their students and listen to what they have to say about what they need. And you've got to be able to engage them, not making them wrong, to say, I learn better if you get books on tape. I learn better visually. I learn better auditorily.
Hmm.
If my dad's not going to do it for me, who was going to do it for me? I had to do it for me. So
Right.
he set the bar for how I had to be my own best advocate.
Yes.
So
That's such a very, it's a useful skill in life.
it
You
is.
have to be, yes. As you know, I've been through the cancer journey,
I know.
and you have to be your own advocate, because the healthcare system is a
Right.
mess. And
It is.
so, yeah, that experience really taught me how to stand up for myself, A, and B, how to be my own advocate. So I sympathize with you. I understand, um, what you had to go through, and at a very early age also. And I love that your father gave you that gift of be your own advocate, be independent. I'm not always going to be there for you.
Right.
Um,
Well, he laid two life credos to me, Grace, that have, I think, that has helped me guide myself into where I am today. He said, A, the only time in life you ever fail is when you don't try.
Yeah.
And B, you have to measure yourself based on what you're capable of achieving, not based on what other people think you should achieve. In other words, don't accelerate the maturation process to make your mother and I feel better. Go go at the pace that you have to go to in order to get to where you need to get to. Don't try to appease your mother and I by trying to achieve more, do more, because
Right.
then if you start measuring yourself based on me, you're never going to try harder. You're going to use me as a scapegoat, and he didn't want me to do
Ah,
that. And and I jokingly said to him one day, I said, Dad, it's hard to live up to somebody who spent most of his life acting like a complete idiot on television to earn a living. I don't exactly aspire to that.
right. That's funny.
I mean, I would tease him and say, Dad, how many love boats have you done? And like, don't tease me about love boat. That put you through college. So yeah,
what were
uh,
what were your speaking of like his characters, what was your favorite character that he
um,
ever has ever done on the Carol Burnett show?
I have two or three. Mother Marcus,
Yeah.
because, because from what I understand, that was very much an homage to his mother and his grandparents, his grandma. I mean, it's sort of like somewhere between Kate Smith and Lady Kazan. And the first time, if you ever watched the Burnett Show bloopers, there's a Dick Clark has it on his show. It's the first time Carol opens the door and sees my dad in that drag because during the rehearsal, they don't have a lot of time to rehearse because you have to remember Price is Right occupied stage 33 from Monday to Thursday for the most
Hmm.
part. So they didn't get into the studio until Thursday. So they had Thursday and Fridays to dry block and do rehearsal for the Burnett Show. They did a lot of free they did a lot of free recording for commercials and dance stuff. But they only had 2 days to really do the show.
Hmm.
So Dad didn't want to get into the whole guard, the whole Mother Marcus guard. So the first time Carol opens the door and sees my dad, she shuts the door. He opens it and he's got his hands on his own breast.
No, I can't.
So uh, Mother Marcus is definitely there. Max, the Max from the Sunset Boulevard, the spinoff of Sunset Boulevard, is also my favorite. Um, and I think anytime um, hmm, he did a, oh, well, Gone with the Wind is Rhett
Oh, of
Butler.
course. What a classic.
And because the whole week, from what Carol and my dad told me, they had no idea because it's so easy to do a caricature of, of the character of Vivian Lee or Clark Gable. So
Yes.
what Carol and my dad tried to do is capture the essence of what those characters were about without doing the caricature. And my dad just couldn't get the walk down. He couldn't get the face. And Bob Mackey put him in this certain pants that the pant cuff was longer than he used, so he had to walk a certain way. But it is so brilliantly written by Rick Hawkins and Liz Sage, who ironically, a lot of people don't know this. They were pages, like people who sit people at theaters. They were pages at NBC, and Rick Hawkins, who wrote the majority of the piece, did his did his thesis on Gone with the Wind in college. So he wrote up this whole homage, and he sent it to Joe Hamilton, Carol's husband, and that's how Rick and his party partner got the job on the Burnett Show, based on that one spoof of Gone with the Wind. And the whole curtain rod was Bob Mackey's idea.
Yeah. It's so
So
funny. Yeah.
um, Those
So,
are my favorite. But
so those are your favorite. And I love the comments. Thank you guys for commenting,
yes,
Dave
thank
and
you.
Howard. I loved how Harvey tried his hardest not to laugh when performing with Tim Conway. His reactions were
Exactly.
priceless. Oh my God. I just watched The Dentist, the
Oh
sketch.
yeah,
Oh my God. I mean, your father, he had tears. I mean, like he could not. I mean, Tim Conway just cracked him up
he
all
actually
the
had a
time.
nail. He actually put a nail in his hand to concentrate,
No.
so he wouldn't start laughing. That if he, he would stick his hand with the nail, so he would cause pain, so he would get his mind off of what Tim was doing. Because Tim and my dad had never worked together. Tim brought that sketch in. Tim had been on the Danny Kaye show where my dad started. But I don't think Danny and my father ever had worked together prior to that time. So that like one of the first sketches, I think the first sketch they ever did together. And I will say this honestly, my father, who is a classically trained actor from Goodman Theater,
Hmm.
he studied with Uta Hagen. My dad was a trained professional actor who was taught always play the truth, don't play the comedy. You always
Right.
approach acting as an actor, not as a comedian. Even no
Exactly.
matter how absurd it is, or how dry it is, or satirical it is, always play the truth of the moment for what the actor is doing. So he was really hard on himself. He didn't break up intentionally. Well, I think there's a fallacy that my dad broke up intentionally. He never did, because Tim
Mhm.
never did the same show twice. They did a dress show at 5:30, then they would do an air show, and Joe and the producers would edit both shows together. So if something didn't work in the first show, they could edit and take something from the second show, so it looked like one well produced show. So,
Yes.
and as much as, and I think if there's a redeeming value in breaking up, I think it's because it made my dad Tim more relatable to the audience and to the crowd,
Mhm.
the public. They weren't saying, "Hey, look, we're doing Shakespeare here. We're doing comedy, and we're going to leave in the mistakes. If you see a boom, you see a boom. If you see a camera, you see a light. Okay, things are going to happen like that." But my dad never went out his way to break up. I mean, they would sometimes break up in the second show because they could get it. They already had it in the can, so they could try to play with each other, be silly with each other. But my dad really tried to very much stay on script because you're there, you're a comedian, you're an actress, you understand this. You're there to
Yeah.
serve the written word. The
Yes.
writer wrote that line for a specific reason, is to articulate a certain thought process to the audience. And if
Mhm.
you go off willy-nilly and start improvising, it dilutes that moment and what you're trying to convey to the audience.
100%. And also the writer wrote it a certain way for a
Right,
reason. You know,
right,
there's a rhythm to comedy. So if they get caught up in the oh, I'm going to improvise here, it loses strength as a
right,
comedy piece, I think, right?
right. And the actor does not know how to respond because he's waiting for his cue. He doesn't
Right.
hear his cue, then he doesn't know how to react. And then the cameraman does not know where to do. Does the cameraman do a two shot? Where should the boom guy be with the boom? Is it a two shot now? Is it a one shot? Is it a master shot now? Because the cameramen have their cue cards on their camera based on what the dialogue is, and they know for what line is for them to cut to another camera. So Dave Powers, who directed the Burnett show, and he went on to direct Three's Company next door. A lot of people don't know this. Three's Company used to shoot next to the Burnett show.
Oh.
So during lunch or in the last season, Burnett show went off in '77, and supposedly Richard Kind, who played Larry Dallas, told me one time that he and John Ritter would go over at lunchtime and sit in the audience and watch the rehearsals of the Burnett show and drive my father crazy with questions.
Oh
And
wow.
and Richard Klein said, "Your dad could not have been more of a mentor to us. He didn't seek it out, but we would just go to him and we would talk about timing and rhythm, and he always would take the time to talk to us." And
Oh.
and for Richard to say that to me, I really appreciate that because my dad didn't necessarily. he didn't go out of his way. When people came to him and said, "Pick your brain about comedy," he would be very gracious and say, "Well, you talk about this, and you do this, and you do that, and you work on this." And um, and John Ritter turned out to be a very, very, very dear friend of my father's.
Oh,
And he was very, very, very a dear man.
he seemed to be. Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And speaking of dear people, humans, in the book you say that Carol Burnett was so kind towards you when you were a child.
yeah, um, there was a guy whose name was Ernie Anderson. He was the voice of ABC. This is the Love Boat. And he and his wife, Edwina, would have these gigantic events at their house in the valley, relays, parties, dance parties. So one time they had this relay thing, and I'm not the most accurate or physically capable person. I have hand-eye coordination, gross motor skills. I'm not, and we're having to climb a jungle gym and ride a bike around and around, and doing all these things, and that's not my strong suit. So I was coming around the corner, head towards the finish line, and I came in third. It was a fun day. It wasn't about winning or losing, but I felt like I had laid down. I had let my team down, and I felt really kind of dejected. And out there, with her hands out there, is Carol Burnett with her arms out, giving me bucks. I said, "You're such a winner,"
Oh,
and I relayed that message, that story to Carol's daughter Jody, and because Carol wrote the foreword to the book, and I wanted to convey to Jody what that moment meant to me in my lifetime. That
wow.
somebody who saw that I needed some validation and love. And Jody never heard that story because I don't know if Jody was there that day. But I said it's one of those seminal moments in your life that happen. You don't realize it until you're older. You realize what changed you. And I realized Carol was celebrating me, challenges and all. My dad celebrated me, challenges and all. So why can I do the same? Why can I celebrate myself? Challenge.
Yes.
If others could do it, why couldn't I do it? But I always struggled with self-esteem, self-confidence,
Hmm.
and I had to find a reason. Well, if others could celebrate me, I had to realize, well, why aren't I doing it? Because they saw something in me that I didn't see,
Right.
and so um, yeah, I tell Jody all the time. The people I have engaged in my life because of the Carol Burnett show is, how do I say it? It cannot be measured by an Emmy point, cannot be measured by a dollar sign or an Emmy nomination. The fruits of the Burnett show are boundless for me. People I got to engage because of that show
Hmm.
are mind blowing to me because you don't expect it. 56 years later, the same people who are all with that show I still connected with. Some of the dancers I talked to on Facebook, Randy Doty and Stan Mason, and we're all still a family. Once you're part of the Burnett family, you're a Burnett member for the rest of your life. And on my website, on my Dr. My Ear website on Facebook, I do that. I honor the Burnett Show. I honor pulp culture. I honor dancers and people that I loved and I adored as people because
Yeah.
far from who they were as artists, if they were good people, I don't care how good they were as artists. I care about who they were as people.
Yes.
Because I had the distinction of being around people like Ken Berry, Betty White. I got
Oh,
to be around Joe Williams, a great jazz singer. I got to be around some incredibly Hal Linden, who's one of my favorite people, or Peter
wow.
Marshall, and or Mike O'Connor's from Mannix. I got to know these people as people, and they would come to my dad's golf tournament that we used to have in Palm Springs for children with learning disabilities. The school was called the Marianne Frosting School for Early Education in Pasadena, or it's Pasadena now. And they would come back every year to see my growth. And I had these people who I saw on television come up to me and giving me hugs and
Hmm.
and love and hugs. And I'm like, this is surreal. These are people I grew up with. And
Right.
they're honoring me, they're acknowledging me. I'm like, what did I do to deserve this? It's because I keep on persevering through my struggles. And,
Yes.
and um, But getting to know these people as human beings, it just made me love them as performers even more because there was something behind the brand that mattered to me. That's why when I network for performers, Grace, like yourself, if I care about the person behind the brand, it's easier to sell the brand.
So how did
Okay,
his dad develop a relationship with Mel Brooks? He was in many of his movies.
okay. Well, it turns out if you go by the first one, Blazing Saddles, Anne Bancroft, his Academy Award winning wife, says to Mel, and Mel told me this at my dad's memorial.
Hmm.
Ed says you should use the guy from the Burnett show. Now, the story goes he had offered the role originally. It was called Black Bart. He originally offered the role of Hedwig Lamar to Gene Wilder. Gene said, "I'm not
Oh,
good for that role," but it was called Black Bart then. He claims that the second person who he offered it was to Carl Reiner, and Carl said that's not true.
huh.
So we're at my dad's memorial, and I got him cornered in the corner of my dad's house, and I'm asking Mel this question, like, "Well, how did you come to know about my dad?" It's like, because my wife, my Academy Award-winning wife, Anne Bancroft said, "Why don't you use the guy from the Burnett show?" Now, my dad takes his agent. They go over to Warner Brothers. They meet with Mel. Mel starts acting out the whole movie, and my dad is so engaged by Mel because he's a 2,000-year-old man. So my dad had such reverential love for Mel. I
Yes.
can't keep up with this guy. He's doing the whole movie in front of me. So the first day was the paddle scene, and they had never worked together. And you thought, well, you know what? You don't know what rhythms different comedians are going to have, actors are going to have with the other person, if it's going to meld, because they had never worked together. And Carl and Mel had this iconic relationship. So
Yes.
this is the first date, and Mel and my dad just meshed. And I don't, it's like lightning in a bottle. You can't explain it. You can't harness it. You either it's there or it's not. Is that my dad and Mel just worked great together. They could pick up on each other's rhythm. They knew not to upstage the other one, and it would just become. They had such simpatico, and he did History of the World Part One, High Anxiety, and Dracula Dead and Loving It together. They did 4 movies together.
Now you help actors as a producer and PR person. You took acting at some point in your life, and your father gave you some advice on being an actor. And if there are any aspiring actors or actors listening right now, what would your father's advice be to them, and what would your advice be to them?
Well, there's that old saying you hear all the time, Grace. What did I do not to get this role? You talked yourself out of the
Yeah.
audition. Obviously, your agent sent you out on that audition for a reason. He thought you could get it because you thought you were right
Yes.
for the role. So what does the actor do? They are their own worst enemy. They start
Yeah.
guessing themselves. They're second guessing their instincts as an actor. And my dad would basically say, just go out there and blow it out. What do you have to lose? All they're looking for, that whole thing is, well, I don't know what they're looking for. Neither do they. They don't
Right.
know until they hear it or they see it. They see something in you. I said, they've not seen all day long. They just want to know, A, do you trust your instincts? B, are you willing to fail in an audition? If you're not willing to fail, how are you going to succeed? I mean, they just want to know that you can trust your instincts. It's
Yes.
better to try something than nothing at all because the producer and the casting director want you to try something so they can see that what kind of chemistry you have with other actors, so they can pair you with certain people. But if you
Yeah.
go in there and think, I'm not going to get this, well, why do you go?
Right. Exactly. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, you already have the no. Go for the
right.
yes.
So my dad would just say, go blow it out. And you know what? This might sound maudlin or funny, but one no can turn into 20 yeses by how you respond to the no. Because remember this, back in the day when there was 3 channels, yes, you made your rounds with the casting people, and if one actor stuck out with them, they would keep on getting work and work and work. Is
Yes.
because they were gracious for the opportunity to work, and it stuck in the casting director's head. Oh, he's really good. but it's how they comported themselves after the audition. And you can talk yourself right out of this business by acting petty or small or, oh, you can get the role, thanks a lot, bye, and then walk out. And like, that's not going to endear you to the next people that you cast with. Because remember, if you look at Hulu, you look at Netflix, they audition year round now. It's no longer a
Right.
school year. It used to be September to May. My dad used to get out in May. We had summers to ourselves. The year would end in May, early June. We had June, July, August, September, and it was school year, and then the redemption went back into production. So we had that
Yeah.
time. Now auditioning is year round. So you don't get a lapse. There is no lapse. You're auditioning maybe 3, 4, 5 times a day. So I tell actors to simply say, hey, thank you for the opportunity to audition. I hope I get a chance to audition for you again, maybe down the road. And hand them the side with the script. Say, thank you. I hope I get a chance to see you guys again. Thank you for this opportunity. That's going to stick out more than, oh, I didn't get it, and then sulk out.
And I'm so happy you found your state of grace.
I did.
And yes, yes, and you overcame a learning disability with the help of your father and yourself. More than anything, you learn to love yourself and you reach your own state of grace. So thank you for being on the show and being vulnerable and talking about your father, yourself, and your challenges. I really appreciate it.